On this Friday night, a very different kind of Canada Day. The parties, the pledge for reconciliation.
We must all work together.
And the protests. A Canadian fighting for Ukraine's freedom.
It's crap here. It's no fun, and everybody suffers.
Why he feels he needs to be on the front lines. China's government tightens its grip on Hong Kong 25 years after handover.
This is a city that is no longer recognizable.
The disappearance of democracy and dissent. And laboring less, but getting more.
Our workforce is happier.
The winning formula of a 4-day work week.
Global National with Farah Nasser. Reporting tonight, Colleen Christie.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. For the first time in 2 years, the federal Canada Day ceremony was held in person in the nation's capital without public health restrictions, but with more protesters than in past years. The celebration is usually on Parliament Hill, but this year the majority of events have been moved to LeBreton Flats, a 20-minute walk west of the hill, because ongoing construction at the centre block has reduced lawn space. Our chief political correspondent David Akin is there, and David, for the first time ever, Canada Day festivities were presided over by an Indigenous Governor-General.
Indeed, Colleen, the ceremony celebrated Indigenous cultures, but it also recognized that at 155 years old, Canada still has a long way to go when it comes to reconciliation.
The
day started with an Anishinaabe water ceremony.
Welcome to our unceded, unsurrendered Algonquin and Anishinaabe territory.
And then it was on to the day's main event, relocated to LeBreton Flats from nearby Parliament Hill, a relocation that was just fine with co-host and comedian Seán O'Shea.
We're a few blocks away at LeBreton Flats Park, which I'm happy about because after 2 years of the pandemic, I'm way better on the flats than I am the hills.
There were performances from Newfoundland's Kelly Loader. Alberta's Tennille Towns. And some Bhangra from Yukon social media star Gurdeep Prandal. And of course, there were speeches.
Hello everyone, happy Canada Day!
Trudeau talked about the symbolism of the maple leaf, with a thinly veiled reference to the so-called Freedom Convoy protesters who often wrap themselves in a flag.
Being able to be who you are, to love whom you love, to chase your dreams, to live without fear, this is the freedom the maple leaf represents.
Both Trudeau and especially Governor-General Simon also said Canada Day is a time to recommit to reconciliation.
We must all work together to walk the road of reconciliation and healing. It begins with understanding and respect.
It is a smaller crowd this year. There was about 4,000 people here, when you might get 10 times that many up there on Parliament Hill. Colleen?
David Akin in Ottawa today. Thanks, David. Police in downtown Ottawa were ready today, expecting anti-government protesters to make their way to Parliament Hill. For most of the day, there wasn't much to see, very different from the truck convoy this past winter. But as the afternoon wore on, the protest crowd grew. Our Abigail Bimman has more.
Midday, security lineups to get onto a mostly empty Parliament Hill. The majority of the hundreds of people along Ottawa's Wellington Street Friday came to celebrate Canada Day.
It feels great. I like being in Canada. It's just fun being here.
We're very excited to be here at Parliament Hill.
While a small contingent among them were anti-mandate, so-called freedom protesters, overlapping with February's original convoy crowd.
We didn't give up. We didn't give in. We are still here, and we're still proud to be here.
We're fighting for our rights. The government's taking it away one step at a time.
Police promising to take a harder line this time around, tensions flaring by mid-afternoon, this group pressing in as bylaw officers told a few protesters they couldn't set up a table here. They say they eventually took it down.
We're getting signatures on
on a declaration to the Joint Committee asking them to recommend Trudeau for treason, to charge Trudeau with treason.
The protest movement doesn't have one clear leader or even one clear group. And in the days leading up to Canada Day, plans kept changing. Police got wind of an event planned for here on the lawn of the Supreme Court. And then these fences went up.
I think that the mandates have been kicked down, but they're still there.
One group planned and then canceled a kids' picnic in a nearby park. But a small contingent, including Maxime Bernier, still showed up.
The government may go ahead with the mandates this fall.
A significantly bigger crowd in the late afternoon on a march through downtown streets. The route kept changing, with police keeping close watch.
Things are going in the right direction, but if they try this again in the fall, we're going to be out double the size.
By evening, police had not yet released any information as to whether there were any arrests Friday after 4 people were arrested at the War Memorial Thursday night. Police say there was a confrontation and one officer was choked. Colleen?
Abigail Bimman in Ottawa. Abigail, thank you. On this Canada Day, some Canadians have chosen to leave the safety of their homes to risk their lives overseas for the freedoms we enjoy here. When Russia invaded Ukraine in February, thousands volunteered to join an international legion to operate as part of Ukraine's military. Among them, a Calgary trucker who said he wanted to do more than just talk. Seán O'Shea met up with him on a brief break from the front line.
Matthew McGill is a long way from home this Canada Day.
I felt that I needed to do whatever I could do to help with the fight.
McGill is 49, a father of 2, and a brand new grandfather. But instead of relaxing with his family this holiday, he's quite literally in the trenches, trying to stop Russians from advancing here in Ukraine.
I have skills that I thought would be useful here.
Signals skills honed as a Canadian Forces member in the 90s.
Canada has trained over 30,000 Ukrainian forces, and part of their ability to work in the field is a tribute to Canadian training.
In 4 months here, McGill says his perspective is forever changed, driven by scenes like these.
How horrible the Russians are in their treatment of the Ukrainian civilians has made me feel more strongly about the need for me to be here.
Monday's attack on this shopping center is Russia's most blatant killing of civilians so far. 18 dead, dozens more injured. Days later, they're still cleaning up, still finding body parts. And then on Thursday night, Russia sent 2 more cruise missiles into an apartment building near the port city of Odessa. Officials say 20 or more were killed. Russia has stepped up its missile strikes in central and eastern areas of Ukraine in the last 2 weeks. McGill told us he's seen fellow soldiers die on the front line.
Being hit by missiles and artillery very close is something that will change everybody.
But he remains here by choice.
It's very Canadian to work for the peace of the world. It's very Canadian to sacrifice your life in order to defend a foreign country against aggression. It's very Canadian to not think of your own welfare, but to think of the broader welfare.
McGill spent a month training with Ukrainians before taking up his post. He says they still need more arms support on the ground. And when I asked him if he had a message in mind on a day many of us are reflecting on Canadian values, he shared this.
Just be grateful that we don't have war in Canada, because it's crap here. It's no fun, and everybody suffers. So just be very thankful that in Canada we have peace and we're not under threat.
It's a perspective forged by extraordinary courage and determination that hits close to home, even from a world away. Seán O'Shea, Global News, Kremenchuk, Ukraine.
The trial of a highly decorated American basketball star facing drug smuggling charges got underway in Russia today. The case against Brittney Griner is thought to be politically motivated. She was charged the week before the Kremlin's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, and given the current political climate, a guilty verdict is expected. It could mean 10 years locked up inside a penal colony. As Crystal Gumansing reports, that's fueling the fight for her freedom.
Whisked into a Russian courtroom away from Western cameras and journalists. Seeing Brittney Griner for just seconds quashed any hopes of getting a sense of the 31-year-old's mental state as she goes on trial in Russia. It's alleged the 2-time Olympic gold medalist smuggled narcotics into the country. TASS, the Russian state media organization, which was allowed to observe the proceedings, reported the court was told Griner had 2 vape cartridges containing small amounts of hash oil in her bags upon arriving in Russia in February.
I did have the opportunity to speak with Ms. Griner in the courtroom. She is doing as well as can be expected in these difficult circumstances, and she asked me to convey that she is in good spirits and is keeping up the faith.
The Women's National Basketball Players Association posted its support of Griner, who went to Russia to play for an international team, noting the 134 days she spent in detention. Efforts to secure her release are ongoing. Last month, advocates penned a letter to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. We now urge you to make a deal to get Brittney back home to America immediately and safely. It was undersigned by dozens of organizations and individuals. U.S. relations with the Kremlin are fraught, and American officials widely consider Griner's detention political. At this point, a guilty verdict is assumed, and while the case is high profile, it may not be the only one of its kind. Paul Whelan, a former Marine with Canadian, British, and American citizenship, was taken into Russian custody in 2018. He was subsequently convicted of espionage and continues to languish in Russia.
The United States government, at the very highest levels, is working very hard to bring Ms. Griner, as well as all wrongfully detained U.S. citizens, safely home.
But as long as there's no end in sight to the war in Ukraine, it's hard to see any resolution for those caught in the crossfire. Crystal Gamansing, Global News, London.
Another careless visitor to Yellowstone National Park in Wyoming is learning about wildlife the hard way, gored by a bison. A 71-year-old woman was taken to hospital with non-life-threatening injuries after approaching a bison with her daughter while returning to their vehicle. It's the second bison attack at the park in just 3 days, and the park's third attack this year. On Monday, a bison charged a group of tourists getting way too close, goring a 34-year-old Colorado man who suffered an arm injury while trying to help a child the animal was chasing. Marking a quarter century under China's rule. Coming up, the anxiety over what lies ahead for Hong Kong. Plus, the reunion, 45 years in the making, no strings attached. China's President Xi Jinping was in Hong Kong today to celebrate a key anniversary. It's been 25 years since the former British colony was handed over to Chinese rule. Back in 1997, the historic move came with a promise the city-state would remain largely free and independent of Beijing. But after years of often violent crackdowns on freedom protesters there, this anniversary is anything but a celebration for many. Jackson Prosco has more.
Once one of the freest societies in Asia, Hong Kong is now firmly under the grasp of China's authoritarian influence. A city in limbo, a shadow of its former glory.
I think in my mind that, and I think for many in Hong Kong, this is a city that is no longer recognizable.
In this global financial capital, July 1st had historically been a day for pro-democracy marches. This year, the city was locked down for a rare visit by Chinese President Xi Jinping, who left mainland China for the first time since the pandemic to proclaim Hong Kong has risen from the ashes.
It is a celebration of the central government's victory over the political opposition in Hong Kong and the so-called foreign forces in Hong Kong.
After the British handover in 1997, China promised Hong Kong would see 50 years of independence. Instead, democratic freedoms have vanished. Dissent has been banned.
We simply cannot avoid the fact that for some time now, Beijing has been failing to comply with its obligations.
China insists no such commitments exist, vowing the promise of one country, two systems still stands, even if Beijing controls both those systems.
Most of us were hoping that Hong Kong would become more democratic with time
and then maybe even help lead China towards a more democratic future.
Instead, China's rush to gain control of Hong Kong has raised fears it may soon challenge the independence of Taiwan, where local officials are vowing to fight for their sovereignty. On the streets of Hong Kong, residents seem resigned to all they've lost in a quarter century. The city has changed, says this man. We cannot go back. Not when freedom has failed to stand the test of time. Jackson Prosco, Global News.
I had a very different case of the Mondays. Why more employers are embracing the 4-day work week.
You're watching Global National.
In this competitive labor market, 9 to 5, Monday to Friday is losing its appeal. A growing number of employers are trying to embrace the 4-day work week. And Gaviola tells us how it's becoming an important tool to attract and retain staff.
Thanks very much.
The Monday scaries are a thing of the past for dozens of municipal workers in the township of Zora in southwestern Ontario. They work a 4-day work week.
That extra day just means a world of difference. We've found a more relaxed atmosphere at work. People seem to be more engaged, and it just seems that our workforce is happier.
Zora trialed compressed work weeks, with some employees getting Mondays off, others Friday, before adopting them for good at the end of last year. Researchers from Western and York universities studied what happened and declared the experiment a huge success, an example of workplace innovation born in the pandemic.
We just felt that was going to be one more tool in our toolbox that would help us not only recruit new employees, but also to retain those key staff members that we do have.
No problem. The township fields weekly calls from municipalities and companies thinking of adopting 4-day work weeks too.
The compressed work week emerged during the pandemic as a solution to worker burnout and an edge in an ultra-competitive labor market. In early June, what's believed to be the biggest test of the 4-day work week began in the UK. 3,300 workers at 70 companies will try it out for half a year, and it includes a variety of sectors from retail to software to financial services.
Square Enix Montreal has tripled its workforce over the last 3 years. One major perk: Magic Mondays. Employees get every other Monday off.
Most people are using it to sort of spread their chores over 3 days, to also play video games, do DIYs, just do things that help them just with mental health.
Here's another one. 500 grand?
What started out as a lifeline for working parents juggling working from home and homeschooling has given the mobile gaming developer a unique weapon in the war for talent.
As a mother of 3, it definitely has been helpful for me to also be able to cope with this homeschooling and everything that had to be adapted during that period. And today it still helps me with the work-life balance.
Who wouldn't want more long weekends, especially in the summer? Anne Gaviola, Global News, Toronto.
Next, after a long pandemic pause, how Canadians from coast to coast to coast are marking the nation's birthday.
There's something special about this one. It is the one. So it's just fantastic.
So cool. A long-time dream came true today for Canadian rock legend Randy Bachman. After nearly half a century of searching, he was reunited with his beloved guitar, which had been stolen from a Toronto hotel back in 1976. The former member of the Guess Who and Bachman Turner Overdrive flew to Japan to reclaim it. The guitar had been in the hands of a Tokyo musician who bought it back in 2014 without knowing its history. Well, for many communities across this country, Canada Day is extra special this year because it's the first time since 2019 most places have been able to hold festivals and gatherings without COVID restrictions. Today, there were parades and parties taking place in every province and territory as Canadians and visitors celebrated together while reflecting on the work that still needs to be done. Here's Heather Urex West.
It's been a little while since these streets hosted a Canada Day parade.
I'd say there's probably a little bit of rusty, and there's a lot of things have changed over the last couple of years.
After a 2-year pandemic pause, Canada Day festivities were back across the country, allowing communities to gather again, wearing red and repping the maple leaf.
Happy Canada Day. It's my first ever because we just moved in here in Canada last January. We are very excited and we look forward to many years of celebrating Canada Day here.
It's great just to get together, and that's what it means to me, just getting together.
But this day is complicated for many Canadians.
When I came here first in the 70s, Canada was like the land of opportunity and everything, right? And as we go along over the years, we learn about, the history of Canada and everything like that. So it's kind of darkened the picture of Canada.
Celebrations were muted in 2021 following the discovery of unmarked graves near the sites of former residential schools. In Edmonton, the day was marked with a reconciliation run.
I feel like a lot of people got almost confused about the celebration of Canada because of the history, but I do think that we can still celebrate being Canadian while still acknowledging the past and the history.
And so we all march forward, celebrating, reflecting on what it means to be Canadian here in Canada on this Canada Day. Heather Yurix-West, Global News, Calgary.
And that is Global National for this Friday night. I'm Colleen Christie. We leave you tonight with more scenes of the celebrations from our nation's capital in person for the first time in 2 years. Thanks for watching and happy Canada Day.